Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be hosting this. Also, nervous, first time doing this, but I'm really excited to have Maëlle here. Hopefully, another panelist joining us soon. But I would like to start with a brief kind of like intro to unconventional materials comics, or kind of like what I mean by that term. All right, so Unconventional Materials Comics is, or I guess Unconventional Materials is a term I co-opted from this fashion show I really like, Project Runway, in which they have a challenge every season in which fashion designers are taken to crazy locations like construction sites, fairs, weird like junkyards, anywhere, and they're asked to kind of scavenge for materials and then make fashion. It's kind of a really crazy challenge in which people are working with things that aren't meant to be made into clothing, and yet they make it work. And I found that the same thing is happening in comics. There's crazy crafters and cartoonists that take their messy studios and turn them into beautiful, beautiful pages of stories. Some examples I have of some artists that I really like. This is an embroidered comic about a cancer memoir by Elizabeth Sheffrin. It is completely embroidered. I am mind-boggled by their commitment to embroider letters. Crazy. This is by Student Serio. It is kind of like cut paper and shadow boxing and mixed media. It's really trippy and really immersive. This is two artists, Roni Fahima and Batia Colton, who just finished a thesis project in which they were making comics tapestries, working on a loom, and they had a whole like experimental presentation. Comics, man. This is Becoming Horses by Disa Wallander with some beautiful mixed media, kind of a little bit of drawn, a little bit of crafted, painted, lots of layering, really beautiful. And going real old school, 16th century European tapestry. This is the Apostles' Creed. And if anybody thinks this is not comics, I will convince you, call me up, we'll have a talk. And we'll also have our wonderful panelists. So, yeah, all right. I think now, May, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself, and then I'll talk a little bit about myself, and we'll go through your process and share some of your awesome comics.
Sure. Hi, my name is Maëlle. I make comics and illustration, and I am the creative director of a small publishing company called Beehive Books. Among many other things, I wear too many hats. It's my eternal quandary. But yeah, should I share my screen now? Is now a good time to do that?
Yes, that's great.
I will do so. And hopefully you guys can see this, which is my name and how I say it in English. Apologies to my parents who are in the waiting room, and I'm butchering the beautiful French name that they gave me. So in French, it's Maëlle Doliveux, but in English, it is Maëlle Doliveux. At least that's how I say it. And I make comics out of cut paper. I work in a couple different ways, but this is my most recent published work called Truce, which was self-published. And I guess it's silent, so I can't really read it, but I will show you the first couple pages of the book. So this is how it starts. Let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow. But yeah, essentially it's a story of this person trying to go to sleep in a room has some strange noises and strange things happening. And I will talk to you about how this was made afterwards, but
For now, we wonder.
for now, it's just a mystery of what you're looking at. So I really wanted to explore kind of shadows in this piece, and the shadows are kind of characters in the story, as is becoming more obvious here. I once presented this whole comic silently by adding a whole bunch of sound effects and musical cues, which is pretty fun, but I didn't have the sound audio to be able to do that today. But yeah, so this is the first couple pages of this book, Truce, and this is the climax, which I won't spoil it if anyone's interested. I think I still have some copies for sale somewhere. They're because of the state of things, I have no idea where my copies are right now. So it's not for sale, unfortunately. But yeah, it's basically a story about shadows and a woman interacting with shadows in her room. And that's the back cover of the comic. And I'm assuming everyone's clapping at home really loudly. I'm getting a lot of,
it's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, there they are. Oh, I'm getting claps. Oh my gosh, it's happening. That was not a call for claps. I totally forgot that was an option on Zoom. But yeah. Also, I want to show you a little bit of some of the behind the scenes. So for this project in particular, I basically built a paper set. So I built tiny little furniture, some of which was fixed and some of which was movable depending on the pieces. So for this example on the night table, for example, like those pieces rearranged, so I couldn't glue them down. So they're all kind of like loosely placed with some tape and strategically photographed so the tape is not visible. A lot of my work is I think less impressive when you see it in person, because you see all these bits of wires and tapes and glue things hanging out, because for me the final product is what's important and what the audience sees. So sometimes even if you like look through the lens, it looks great of the camera, and then if you step to the side, there's just like bits flying everywhere and things glued to water bottles to hold them in place. So it's always a bit rough, but you know, it gets the job done.
That's how magic happens.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And these are tiny paper clothes. And this is some of the offcuts. So this is my garbage basically here that you're seeing right now. But so every time that the character appeared, I would have to recut her completely from scratch. There's a couple very few exceptions to this in this project, which I don't usually do. But there were a couple angles where she's positioned exactly the same in bed, and it's just her expressions that change. So for those panels, I would just redo the face and kind of have this body puppet that I would, again, like loosely assemble so that I could swap out the heads for that particular angle. But for the most part, every time the character appears, it's a new piece of paper. And this is my garbage that you're seeing, but I think it's kind of fun to look at. And this is what the set looks like. So it's basically just a box, and I built it in a way, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is it here. This is something else back here for a separate project. My studio is very messy, as I'm sure I'd be surprised if anyone on this panel has a non-messy studio. I think that's probably just the nature of what we do. But yeah, so this is the set, and each wall of this set is removable. That way I could photograph from every angle of the story. And so I had to make like a shot list, like how kind of like how a film director or something would shoot it, so that I wasn't moving the walls all the time. So I would shoot everything that needed one wall removed first, and then I would go to the next wall and shoot everything that needed that wall removed, to try to be efficient. Because you know, it's all about efficiency when you work in this medium. That's really what we're going for here. And this is just to give you a sense of scale. This is my hand. I do have fairly small hands, but this is what the set looked like. And that's pretty much it. And then I was gonna skip through this. I don't know how long I've been talking. How long have we been going for?
It's been about like at 5-ish. You can
Okay.
keep going.
I can keep going?
Yes.
Switch up? Okay.
Yeah. Show
all
us
right,
all a wonder.
This is, so now so that's kind of a more three-dimensional way that I work, where I like really build a three-dimensional space and light it, you know, in this way. And then another way that I work is that I kind of fake 3 dimensions, so to speak, which maybe this will clarify. This is for a book that I did called Goodnight Wind. And this is just the process for the book. So getting the dummy from the publisher, doing some research. This is all some research. I won't go into it too much, but these are some sketches for the main character. The book is about winter wind looking for a place to sleep. And so these are some studies that I wanted for my wind character, and then some kind of final drawings when I was happy with its general shape. And these are some color studies of figuring out what color I wanted, because another issue with how I work is that it's very difficult for me to change the color in post. So I photograph and then I try to do the least amount in Photoshop possible, just because I think it's obvious, and also what's the point? Like if I'm going to be doing all this color changes, then you know, I should have done it to begin with. So I plan out my color before I do the final piece, and to make sure that the contrast between different shapes works. And also, especially when I work with the client, so for this case, it was my publisher, to make sure that they approve the colors before I go to final, so that, you know, they don't say at the end, oh, can we make the character yellow instead? That would kind of ruin my whole life, probably. So I do pretty extensive color studies ahead of time. And then I do little paper mock-ups of this character in this case. And then I do some final drawings. And then again, color tests for what the spread would actually look like. And then what I didn't show you here is all the cutting and gluing, which is fairly time consuming, but so this is kind of the stuff around it. And then, so I've built myself this kind of set that I can reuse, which is basically a very simple rail system, which you can see here. You'll get a close-up of it in a second, but this is kind of a fairly good shot. So there's kind of all these slides, and I can slide my bits of paper in between, so I can get the distance from the camera that I want in terms of aperture and focus, and you know, how things line up and how the shadows are cast on the different pieces of paper. So this is roughly what my setup looks like. So I have my table with my set kind of clamped down to it, and then I have my tripod with usually my camera sitting on top of it, but I am using my camera to take this picture, so obviously it's not there right now. And then I have some different lighting equipment that I use to photograph everything. And this is here, you can see the railing system pretty clearly. So it's wow. You know, it's just foam core. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it really works. And so then I have, it's spaced out for just the width of a certain kind of foam core that I like to use. And then my piece of paper is stuck onto it. And then there's, for any kind of flying objects, there's little bits of wire that are hidden behind that piece of paper. Here you can see there's a wire behind this child figure, and there is very likely a wire behind this kite here that you see a little more clearly in a second. And probably, yeah, there's also definitely a wire behind this character on a swing. So anything that's like magically flying, I wish that I had the power of telekinesis to be able to just get those perfectly in space. But no, I have to go in and put tiny little wires, and then I Photoshop them out, as you can see. I already took that one out. And then this is the extent of Photoshopping that I do. So this is a little bit Photoshopped already, but pretty much the image that I photographed. And then this is what the final image in the book looks like. So, you know, I work on things like making sure that the contrast behind certain characters is pronounced enough that they read. And my publisher had a note about, you know, the eyes of the character here not being legible enough. So I kind of went back in and did some of that. And then I added all of these magical floating bits, which are obviously would have been extremely time consuming if I had done them all with wire. So I kind of, this I did fake digitally. I'm sorry, I'm bad, I cheated, I'm so bad. But that's it, and that's what the final spread looks like. And I just knew that for this book in particular, I liked the idea of having all, because it's about wind and movement, having all these kind of flying bits everywhere. And I am somewhat of a masochist, but not so much of a masochist. So I have my limits as well. And these are some spreads from this book. Yeah, all sorts of different kinds of stuff. And then it's probably my favorite spread from the book. And that's the cover. And this is from the book that I'm working on now, which is called I Will Live Forever, because my ego is huge. And it's a book of short stories. They're all going to be cut paper. And I'm hoping it comes out next year, but it is taking me longer than I thought it would. I don't know why it's so time consuming to cut all these tiny things out of paper. So I apologize to all my Kickstarter backers who have been very supportive and kind with the delays on this project. But I am working on it, and this is just one of the spreads from this book. So this is kind of, again, my rough sketch thumbnails with colors that I know kind of what color I want to do. And then this is my type drawing, which I do on tracing paper so that I can reverse it and draw it on the back of the final paper, so that then I can flip that forward and you don't see any pencil lines. It's like my little trick to kind of work backwards. And there's lots of little tick marks because that helps me keep track of which mushrooms I have cut and which mushrooms I have not cut. So, and this is just on a piece of white paper so you can see what's going on. And this is my handy dandy scalpel. I do most of my cutting with this. I don't actually use scissors all that much. And this is what the final piece looks like, though this is not the final photograph, so I will still have to do that, but I'm going to be photographing everything at the end. And this is the cover for the book and some more art that's going to be in the book. And that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, wow. I'm like floored. I had no idea that you worked so three-dimensionally, especially with like even the ones that are like more the 2D. Seeing your little setup with the foam core, that kind of just blew my mind a little bit. Like,
it definitely took a couple of years to get there. Like when I was first doing this kind of work, I shot down, which was insane. So like I was literally having my camera on top of chairs, and I would stand on top of a chair and photograph down. That way everything was on the floor and I could like have boxes in between stuff. And then I was like, this is not a manageable way of working, to just be balancing on a whole bunch of chairs. This is only going to end in disaster when I get really tired one day, which is bound to happen. So yeah, once I kind of figured out the track system, that really was a bit of a life changer for me. But yeah, I'm curious to see your work now.
Yeah. All right. Back to my PowerPoint. All right, so I like to work. I can't choose just like one medium. I'm like constantly exploring and playing, because that's kind of just how I function. And so I kind of like came to like unconventional materials for my comics as a way to keep myself entertained, and because I really like how they look. So I'll talk a little bit about several of how I approach these, but mainly I want to talk about my needle felted comic, Grow. It's also a silent comic, and it's about a mushroom who is found by a witch who is passing by the woods. And she kind of gets really like amazed by it, and an idea pops in her head. And she casts some magic, and the mushroom starts to grow until it's a little sentient mushroom. It's got little legs, and she gives it a gift and goes off on her way, leaving the mushroom a little bit confused. And the mushroom kind of stays, not sure what to do, feeling kind of sad for being abandoned. Until another mushroom grows, and it starts to care for it, and eventually has its own giant mushroom garden, growing its own friends, and all that it needs. So this mini comic actually started as a like little zine, a little paper zine that I had, and it was only 6 pages. And I drew it because I had been working at a Lego camp, and I had made this little mushroom farmer Lego figurine, and I just thought that he was such a cute character, and I wanted to make a little story about him. And I made it, and I was like, okay, this is good. And then I left it, like let it go, went on to do other stuff. And then this idea just kept coming back in my mind. I felt like this wasn't the final version for this piece. And so I kind of went back and I was like, maybe it just needs color if I kind of go in markers. And this was like my like prototype, seeing if I wanted to really go into it. But just with this, I was like, this isn't it. It needs something more. And for the past like few years, around the same time that I was kind of doing with this story, I had started needle felting. And so I thought, why not needle felt a comic? And so this is kind of the process I went through. I got these square felt sheets that I embroidered panels into. And then I kind of had to do a little bit of like color selection. I had a whole bunch of wool roving. Needle felting is made by taking basically usually sheep's wool that gets processed and dyed and into different colors, and you take little tufts of it, and you have this special needle felting needle that has little barbs on it, and you are basically poking the wool until it becomes tangled within itself, and it starts to kind of like making like a big hairball. And so you can needle felt in like 3D shapes that kind of like are a little bit, you're poking it into itself. And working 2D, I was basically poking into this felt sheet on top of foam so that I didn't break my needle. This is a little bit of a looked at each stage. So I had to kind of work in layers adding onto it. So I had to do the backgrounds first. I tried to do something that covered the entire panel. Even though, as you can see, like the next step was adding details to the background. Most of that blue sky got covered up, but it was like a nicer to just fill in all that space. And each of these like little rocks were like little needle felted rocks, and then I poked them into it. And then I would do the characters on top, and I kind of tried to like, give them a lot of like volume, so that you can kind of get a little bit of the shadowing. And at the next point, I was going for like what my lettering or speech bubbles, and I was very glad that I had gone for a silent comic, because I did not want to embroider lots of words. Question marks and exclamation points were hard enough. Yeah, so like that was the process of the of grow. And I did the cover last, and I of course went for some glitter, and the whole cover is needle felted as well. As for some of my other projects, this is a little zine called See Through, and this one, whereas for Grow I had like a story that I already knew what I was going to make. See Through came through just my design, like it was a material that I wanted to use. This was just like, it's like tracing paper, and I just, tracing paper has such a it's the transparent quality to it is really fun, and it really intrigued me, and I wanted to know what it would be like if you had pages that you could kind of see what came before it. And I also had I had some new Posca markers I wanted to try out, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do about it, and I kind of just took it page by page, first drawing patterns onto it and then words, and it ended up being about wanting to be like my art to be seen, and how that desire feels like really transparent, being like, you know, am I making art just because I want people to see it, or am I making it for myself? And it just like, if the story that I told was very informed by the medium that I had chosen to do. This project was for a anthology that I helped organize, that was all about Asian American Pacific Islander artists and kind of like why they make art. And I wanted to showcase my collection of lycée, which are these little red envelopes that are given during the Chinese New Year as kind of like sign, like gifts of prosperity, good luck. And I had a whole collection from when I was a kid, and they were really near and dear to me. And they're basically like little bits of art that you get. And they really inspired me a lot as a kid. So I wanted to showcase them. And it took me a while to figure out how I wanted to do that. I tried to do like a little painted version of it, but I wasn't capturing the kind of like glitzy gold to it and the really fine details that were like a little bit beyond my own artistic capabilities. So I went, you know, what if I actually use the pieces themselves? And so I collected my album and I began to arrange, like I went through my whole collection, picking out the right lycée to put and showcase the right points, making sure that they kind of, just in the way that you'd make a comic of like, you know, what are my words? What are my picture images? How do they, how do they go together? And so that was kind of, you know, getting to find a reason to showcase my Pizza Hut lycée was like one of the greatest parts of this project. And then I also attempted to make a cut paper comic, and this is actually, I made this a few weeks after being shown one of your comics, Maëlle. It was your Fable comic,
Yeah.
for the Aesop Fables, and we were in class, and I'm a student at the Center for Cartoon Studies, and it was kind of like my teacher just kind of showed us, he was just showing a bunch of examples. I think we had a Fable assignment, and it just stuck with me, and I was like, how do you do that? I don't so then I was like, I don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna try. And so this is a 4-page little comic that I did all in cut paper, part of kind of trying to solve the solution of like, how can I make this happen? And you know, there was a lot of like I did this also a little bit last minute. It was like we had 2 projects assigned, and I decided that I would make my one of my projects that was supposed to be 4 pages and easy, I would make it difficult. So I ran to like my paper supplies, and I had like construction paper and origami paper, and I kind of like took what I had and was like, okay, that was my first decision. And then I was kind of working like the like page by page. I didn't really know where I was going with it, so I kind of would just sketch out the idea that I had. I took a lot of reference photos because I was kind of like trying to get the poses right, because if you're, you know, I don't only want to cut it out once. And I got really into like making the tiny details, and at the same time my wrist started hurting and I had like a week to do it, and then I also had another assignment, and so I was kind of like step by step being like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. But I loved it. It was maybe because I got to work with shiny paper, and I am a sucker for shiny things. But you know, like this is kind of like step by step. Like I would lay out the colors, and then I would just layer and glue and glue. And I ended up with a very messy desk and kind of like tiny paper dolls that fit in my hand. And that's that.
It looks great. I'm so touched that, first of all, anyone's seen that comic, and that it moved you to make something. That's awesome, and it turned out awesome. It looks great.
Thank you. Though now you've given me so many ideas. The next time I do this, it's going to be even like
now
an
you can
even
go
bigger production.
deep,
I'm like
deep crazy. Can go deep into the level of
like the whole
it's
stage.
a dark path, this this level of detail. But it's funny, at the beginning you said you kept getting bored with stuff, and I feel like that's similar to me, where like the idea of having to do conventional comics, of doing thumbnails, then pencil drawings, then ink drawings, then color, then lettering of the same drawing over and over and over again. I couldn't do that. Like I couldn't do that. I just feel like I kind of do color and all of that stuff all at once in a way. And so I know that people are like, oh, it takes so much time, but in a way I'm like, I feel like I'm lazy because I don't want to do what other, people do in terms of how they organize color. But yeah. I think we have some questions. Do we have some questions?
You do. You have a lot of questions, actually. So,
awesome.
I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. I might kind of put a couple together just so we can kind of touch on everything. People are really excited about your work. So, can you talk a little bit about what artists influence your work, and also where you get some of your inspiration?
Well, I just outed Maëlle as one of mine. But I look to a lot of like different illustrations, and kind of like I grew up going to art museums all the time. And so just like being surrounded by lots of different anime art is kind of like what I like.
Yeah, I think similarly, it's very varied. Like I like Jean-Pierre Jeunet movies, and then I like Georgia O'Keeffe, and then I like, Art Deco posters, and I studied architecture originally, so I have, some background there. And then in terms of other comics artists, I'm a big Eleanor Davis fan. I'm a big Gillian Tamaki fan. I'm a big fan of Asterios Polyp. That's probably one of my favorite comics. I don't know, I think it's very, very varied. And then in terms of paper artists, I'm now forgetting his name, but there was an artist he works specifically only with white letter sheet sized paper, and he makes the most amazing stuff like that. And he will just take one piece of paper, and there'll be like a skeleton shape, and then he'll use that to extrude it into a three-dimensional human figure. It like makes no sense. I don't understand how he works, and it's all like one simple sheet of paper. I will post it on my Twitter or Instagram when I remember his name. I don't know how else to get that information to you, but he also does really strange performance art where he dresses up like a huge bird.
Oh, that's great. I love weird performance art as well. I think that helps.
Yeah, I think it's all connected.
Yeah. Also, I have one artist I wanted to shout out. Andrea Animates on Instagram does these needle felted animated movies, and they're crazy. So check them out.
Awesome. How do you feel the media you use adds to the story you're telling?
It's definitely something that I consider. So for example, with the Truce comic, the comic that I had done before that, which was that Fables comic that Filipa saw, was much flatter in a way. And I really wanted to push it into a very, very three-dimensional area and like build a set. But then I thought, okay, so I also was thinking for that project, I was like, oh, there's a convention coming up in 3 weeks. I can do a 3D comic in 3 weeks. No problem. As long as I keep it to one set. So then I thought, okay, it has to be a story that's told within a room. And I really wanted to play with shadows. So I kind of set up the constraints for myself before the story came. And then the story was kind of supporting those constraints in that specific thing. But I also think that there's something, hopefully, about my medium that people can tell that it's paper, and that there's a kind of fragility there that I'm interested in working with in terms of story.
Yeah, I kind of I talk a little bit as I kind of take it project by project. And I feel like just as anyone is making choices about what colors they're using, whether they're going to use, like pen and ink or digitally or brush, all those choices that go into comics really affect how you read the comics and how you feel about them. And I feel like this is just like another choice where you can, Grow needed to be needle felted, and I didn't know it needed to be needle felted until I got to it, and it felt right, and it just it was plush, and felt whimsical, and it captured the feeling that I wanted for the little
comic. This is kind of a fun one. Do either each of you for each of you, do you have a material that you are currently holding onto or puzzling with in your studio that you haven't quite figured out what to do with yet, but you're like feeling like you want to do something with it?
I have drawers full of that. I just I have so many. I just keep everything that looks interesting to me, and I'm constantly like, there's a sale at Michael's. Here, I'm gonna buy all this weird like little knickknacks. I also have like a whole trove of like resin work that I kind of was dabbling with, and like lately I've been thinking, how do resin comics? So maybe.
Yeah, I'm the same. I also do stuff I used to do stuff in like theater and comedy and stuff like that, and I would, I've made costumes and masks and stuff, so I just have like a bucket full of plastic eggs. I'm like, one day I'll be very thankful that I held on to all those plastic eggs. Right now it's just sitting somewhere doing nothing, but I remember that I have it. And then otherwise there's like certain sheets of paper where I can't find it anymore, and I don't know where they make it. There used to be an awesome art shop in New York City called New York Central Art Supply, and they had the best paper selection probably in the world, I think. And unfortunately they went under, but I got some really strange sheets of like textured paper from them that I'm like, okay, I only have, half a sheet left. I got to be real careful about what I use this like beautiful brown leather texture for. So, or like this hairy texture. So some papers like that I know that I have, and I keep saving them for something special.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes, so I think I can get a few more in. Because materiality is such an important part of your process, have you focused mainly on print mediums as your final result? Or have you also considered how your works could be distributed digitally? And this is for both of you.
I've been like putting my stuff up online as well. I find that the going to the print medium for me is kind of like the trickiest part. It's very easy to like photograph or scan my work and then kind of like put it up, but then when I'm kind of like, oh, I want to print this and I want to give this to people, a lot of more questions start coming up. Like I'm right now trying to screen print a crazy cover for Grow that captures the needle felted version of it because I didn't want to just like print it. And that has been a whole endeavor that I'm still working on.
Yeah, I think printing is different because we're basically printing photographs, and you have to start getting into the details of photography printing, and like what papers you use and what printer you work with is going to have a huge impact on what that looks like. I'm also a bit of a print nerd, and I'm the graphic designer at our publishing company, so I work very closely with their printer there. And I'm kind of excited about that aspect of it. And I also think that there's something interesting with my work of like it being cut paper that's printed on paper. I feel like there's a physical kind of illusion there almost that I find interesting. So I've mainly been working with print, but I also know that it takes a while to figure out how to correctly edit your images so that they will print correctly, because you end up losing a lot of the details, especially in the darks, and also understanding the scale to which you're printing. For example, I work at the scale that I print at, because otherwise if I shrink it down, I lose all of the paper texture and it just starts to look like it's digital, which is really strange. But so yeah, it's just like a lot of trial and error, I feel like, is how you learn about printing mainly. But yeah, I'm not too I'm not much online, I would say. I'm starting to get into live streaming because I feel like people are interested in the process in a way, so I've been doing more of that. I don't know, do you do some of that stuff, Filipa? Any live
I
streaming?
haven't tried live streaming, but it might be kind of fun.
Yeah, I feel like we have a Bob Ross advantage to the
Just
work.
watch me poke repeatedly.
Yeah, I think people enjoy. I hope people enjoy that. I don't know.
Let's see. Oh, what do you do with the physical pieces once you've finished a product?
The bane of my existence.
Box.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got grow all like.
Whoa, you actually made it as like a whole book?
Yeah, because I'm crazy. And I was like, I wanted to know how it kind of would feel like, and so I'm kind of keeping it with like individual felted pages so they don't get like tangled. And my dad has my paper cut pieces, so who knows what he's doing with them.
Same here. It's a lot of box, and I am concerned as I age how many boxes of art that I own. I hope that once the book comes out, people will hopefully buy some of it from me. That's the advantage to doing this kind of thing. I think it's also like nice to see in person. But yeah, a lot of boxes sitting in either storage or my tiny studio. It's not the most efficient. I know that if you know Red Nose Studios or Chris Sickles, he's a 3D illustrator who makes puppets, and he has, I think, a barn full of his puppets. And I think that's my dream goal, is one day get a barn, get a barn and put all my work in there.
Permanent exhibit.
Mm.
Awesome. Maëlle, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but somebody asked, what kind of paper are you using?
I use mainly Canson Meatand paper. Here, I'll write it in the chat, like this. And Fabriano Tiziano. I use those papers very specifically because they have good memory and weight, so that when I fold them, they're not so thick that I get lots of extra folds in the paper, and they're not so thin that they can't support their own weight. So to me, that's the perfect balance. And there's also a really wide range of colors in those two lines, which is why I do that, though they have been doing less and less colors. So please purchase from them so they can not, pull any more colors from their lines.
There's a question, does one of you work with polymer clay, or?
Oh, that is Eunsoo. I can actually show a little bit of her work, even though she wasn't able to join us, because I think it's really cool. She does Korean Angry Comics is the name of like her Instagram, and there. How do I go? There we go. There. And she has like little models, like wired models covered in clay and like foam hair, and she does a whole little like box setup as well.
That reminds me of a bit of Cuddles and Rage's work. I don't know if you know their work, but they work in polymer clay as well. They do really cute and morbid fruit comics.
So we're just about at time, but I'm going to close it with the final question. Filipa, where did you get your glasses?
Oh, Zenny Optical. They have nice, affordable glasses, and I have way too many pairs of different glasses. I do have, I have my page with some, like where to find me. I use mostly Twitter at Phyllis Feet, and my website, feltmythical.com, and I got Maëlle's
good, perfect.
Instagram and Twitter and website. And lastly, I wanted to announce that I'm putting together a Unconventional Materials comics anthology called Mandarin Realms. And I really want to encourage the people to try and like make these kinds of comics because I think they're really magical. And so if you're interested in submitting, I'm accepting pitches, and on my website, there's like more details about it. Make comics, everybody.